Millionaire's pregnant wife sees him hugging Mistress outside a hotel. She leaves in regret. They were once the picture of marital bliss. Alexander Barnes, a magnetic millionaire known for his ruthless business acumen, and his radiant wife, Veronica, expecting their first child. Their love story shone like a fairy tale until a single encounter outside a gleaming hotel shattered everything. On a crisp autumn evening, Veronica caught a glimpse of her husband in the arms of another woman, intimate, unguarded, undeniably real. In that devastating moment, Veronica felt their bond splinter. Little did either of them know that this heartbreak would spark a chain of events, forcing them to face secrets, betrayals, and regrets beyond imagination. Veronica Barnes had never considered herself a jealous wife. She prided herself on being self-assured, a trait she had cultivated over years of juggling high-stakes negotiation with philanthropic events in Chicago's elite circles. At 30, with her dark hair and serene gaze, she radiated both intelligence and confidence, a perfect match for her husband, Alexander Barnes, whose reputation in real estate investments preceded him. They had married 2 years prior at a lavish ceremony along Lake Michigan, quickly becoming the subject of tabloids that gleefully celebrated the union of a handsome millionaire and a kind-hearted, graceful woman from a well-to-do family. Yet as her pregnancy progressed, Veronica found herself ill at ease. The initial joy of expecting a child was overshadowed by a persistent sense of anxiety, subtle but gnawing at her. She couldn't pinpoint when the first flicker of doubt ignited in her mind. Alexander had always been attentive and gentle, offering her foot massages after long days and reading up on baby care. But over the past few months, he'd been staying out late more frequently, and the glow in his eyes had gradually been replaced by a somber shadow. Veronica tried telling herself that all men felt the weight of fatherhood and that Alexander's increased workload was his way of preparing for their baby's financial security. Still, the hush in the house spoke volumes. Their once lively dinners had turned quiet. Even their private jokes, humorous jabs at Alexander's business partner, Harris Kim, or the comedic remarks about the outlandish socialites at charity galas, felt stale. Meanwhile, Veronica's belly was expanding, a constant reminder that time was pressing forward and that their child's arrival edged closer by the day. It was one evening in particular that magnified her uncertainties. Alexander claimed he had an emergency business meeting that would stretch late into the night. Sitting alone in their penthouse, overlooking Chicago's shimmering skyline, Veronica's mind churned with scenarios. She attempted to distract herself by calling her friend, Sofia Delgado. Sofia listened carefully as Veronica's voice trembled, something entirely out of character for the usually poised woman. Sofia tried to reassure her, saying, "You know Alexander is devoted to you, Ronnie. He's probably drowning in paperwork. Don't let the tabloids or your hormones feed your paranoia." Still, Veronica couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She recalled hearing gossip at a benefit about a woman named Mia Donovan, a sophisticated interior designer from New York, rumored to have been seen with Alexander during a conference in Manhattan. Veronica had laughed it off at first. Rumors were a dime a dozen in their circles. But that night, as she stared out the window, counting the headlights below, she felt the loneliness for the first time in her marriage, and it settled inside her like a cold weight. For now, she kept her growing suspicions to herself, determined to protect her marriage and her unborn child from the hounding curiosity of society. But in her heart, questions had begun to stir. Little did she know, the answers would soon crash into her life in the most devastating way. 2 weeks later, Veronica was invited to a high-profile charity gala at the historic Waldorf Hotel in downtown Chicago. Typically, Alexander would be the one dragging her there in a sleek black limousine, for these events offered him prime networking opportunities. That night, however, he had a prior engagement in New York to finalize a multi-million-dollar property acquisition. He insisted she go without him, stressing the significance of her presence as a philanthropic face for the family. After all, Alexander Barnes was about to become a father, and public image mattered in his world. Veronica arrived at the Waldorf Hotel dressed in an elegant navy blue gown that draped around her growing belly. She smiled graciously at photographers who continued to shower her with compliments. The glitz and glamour, the star-studded guests, people like Julia Anderson from Boston's philanthropic circles, and Benjamin Fowler, a Chicago-based tech mogul, formed a dazzling swirl of conversation and champagne. Despite the bright lights, Veronica felt a pang of loneliness. She missed Alexander's steady hand around her waist, guiding her through the crowd. Her mind was too preoccupied to settle into friendly chatter. She made polite small talk with the hostess, Patricia Harrington, who was raising money for a children's cancer research center. Veronica greeted acquaintances, took part in the silent auction, and thanked donors. She was exhausted, mentally and physically, from wearing a brilliant smile that masked her churning inner world. Just as she was about to slip away quietly, a figure in a dark suit at the far end of the ballroom caught her eye. He looked all too familiar, tall, broad shoulders, the confident posture she recognized as belonging to her husband. Shock coursed through her like an electric jolt. Alexander was supposed to be in New York. What was he doing here? She watched him from a distance, unsure if she should approach him immediately or wait for him to notice her. Was he there to surprise her? A trickle of hope warmed her chest. Maybe he was planning a grand romantic gesture. She began maneuvering through the crowd, weaving past socialites and business moguls. But just as she was about to call his name, she saw him turn and extend his arms around a woman with wavy auburn hair. Her back was turned, so Veronica couldn't see her face. The hug was more than cordial. It was close, intimate, as though they were sharing a private, treasured moment. Veronica froze in her tracks. Her heart thumped violently. Time slowed, the clinking of wine glasses and the murmur of voices fading into a dull roar in her ears. She stepped back, seeking refuge behind a marble column to observe. The woman turned slightly, revealing her profile, a beautiful, sophisticated face. In that instant, Veronica recognized her, Mia Donovan, the interior designer from New York, the subject of swirling rumors. As if pulled by a silent force, Veronica followed them, staying just far enough behind so she wouldn't be noticed. She watched as Alexander guided Mia out of the ballroom and into a small corridor leading to the hotel's rear exit. Disbelief burned into fury, heartbreak clashing with confusion. All the whispered speculation, the gossip. It was real, clutching the diamond necklace Alexander had gifted her on their first anniversary. Veronica tried to steady her breathing. She felt faint, her stomach knotting. But she needed to see, needed confirmation, even if it shattered her world. In the dimly lit corridor of the Waldorf Hotel, Alexander's silhouette briefly merged with Mia's as they paused near a secluded side entrance. Veronica, hidden behind a tall potted fern, leaned forward just enough to witness the most damning sight. Alexander cupped Mia's face gently, smiled into her eyes, and pulled her into an affectionate embrace. It wasn't a polite, social hug. It was the kind of hug that Veronica had once believed belonged to her alone, the silent promise of intimacy and love. Veronica's blood turned cold. For a moment, she thought she might faint. Her head spun with the memory of their wedding vows, the day they stood before loved ones, pledging their faithfulness. She thought of all the times Alexander had kissed her forehead, reassuringly, whenever doubt clouded her mind. Now, in one crushing moment, she saw his betrayal laid bare. She wanted to storm out, to confront them right there and then. Yet a sliver of self-preservation told her that more people could be watching, photographers possibly waiting around every corner. The last thing she needed was to become fodder for tabloids. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood, forcing her feet to remain silent on the checkered tile as she continued to watch. Before she could even decide on her next move, Alexander and Mia turned to walk away. Not wanting to lose sight of them, Veronica trailed a few steps behind. They exited through the side door, stepping out into the crisp autumn air, with just the streetlights to illuminate their figures. Veronica pressed her body against the cool metal frame of the door, her breaths shallow as she peered out. "Shall I call you a car?" Alexander asked in a gentle tone. Mia laughed softly. "I can handle myself, darling. I came with a driver, but I do appreciate the concern. Darling." The words sliced through Veronica's heart like a blade. Seeing them this way, it was no misunderstanding. There was no plausible explanation that could excuse such closeness. If he was comforting a colleague, it wouldn't be so tender, so loving. And he had lied about being in New York. Mia placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder, her eyes drifting over his face. "I'll see you soon," she said, turning to walk toward a sleek black sedan. Alexander watched her go. His face softened in longing and expression Veronica had believed was reserved only for her. In that moment, Veronica realized she had her proof. She didn't need to wait around for more. Her marriage, built on trust and partnership, was in grave peril. And in the swirling mess of heartbreak and anger, another emotion took hold, protectiveness for her unborn child. How could she raise a baby in such deceit? Trembling, Veronica turned away, nearly stumbling in her heels. The doorman politely tipped his hat as she rushed through the lobby, ignoring the curious glances from guests. Her eyes brimmed with tears, though she refused to let them fall. She fumbled for her phone, breath hitching, and dialed the number of her private driver. "Please pick me up now," she managed to say, voice cracking. "I'll be on the curb." There was no going back after what she'd seen. Unbeknownst to Alexander, everything in their world had just changed forever. The following morning, Veronica awoke in their penthouse's master bedroom. The sky outside tinted a pastel orange as the sun crept over the Chicago skyline. She hadn't heard Alexander come home, which meant he might still be out or possibly in the guest room to avoid confronting her. Either way, she felt a pang of nausea unrelated to her pregnancy. Each time her mind replayed last night's scene, her stomach lurched and her heart pounded with fresh betrayal. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, the memory of Alexander and Mia's embrace searing her senses. For months, she had suspected something was off, but to witness it firsthand was an agony she never anticipated. Before heartbreak could paralyze her, anger and self-preservation propelled her into action. She walked to her closet, gathered a few essentials, a week's worth of clothes, her favorite flat shoes, a photo of her parents, and her prenatal vitamins. Methodically, she zipped them up in a small suitcase. Her movements were mechanical, each step taken on pure instinct. Just as she set the suitcase on the bed, her phone buzzed. It was Sophia. "Ronnie, are you okay?" came Sophia's urgent whisper. "I saw you leave the gala in a hurry." "Is everything all right?" Veronica paused, tears threatening to break free. She forced them back, determined to maintain composure. "No, it's not. Sophia, I saw Alexander with someone else." There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then Sophia's voice, subdued and worried. "Oh, Ronnie, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come over?" "Yes, please. I'm leaving this place." Within an hour, Sophia arrived. Veronica clutched her friend as though she were a lifeline in a raging sea. Softly, Sophia asked if she was absolutely certain about leaving. Veronica nodded, her resolve unshaken. She couldn't stay under the same roof with Alexander while her mind reeled with last night's images. More than anything, she needed space to think, to breathe, and to protect her unborn child from the storm swirling in her heart. Sophia helped her call a taxi, insisting that Veronica stay at her apartment until she figured out her next move. While waiting by the foyer, Veronica spotted a recent photo of herself, and Alexander displayed on a marble side table a promotional shot taken at a new hospital wing they had funded. In the picture, they appeared the epitome of a happy, expectant couple. Gently, she turned the frame face down. She no longer wanted to see what felt like a cruel facade. As they descended in the private elevator, Veronica's mind churned with conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to confront Alexander, to demand answers. But another part was too raw with pain to stomach his excuses or half-truths. She had discovered the betrayal herself with her own eyes, and that evidence was damning enough. Stepping out onto the bustling Chicago street, Veronica felt a momentary pang of guilt. Was she overreacting? But then the memory slammed her again. The intimate hug, the longing stare, the word darling floating in the air. If anything, she wasn't reacting strongly enough, she told herself. With Sophia at her side, she slid into the taxi and softly pressed her hand against her stomach. Her baby. That was all that mattered now. And if Alexander's love belonged elsewhere, she had no choice but to shield her child from the fallout. Alexander Barnes returned home at sunrise, exhausted from a night of both excitement and worry. Business deals had gone well. He had met with key investors after the gala, smoothing out the final details of a real estate project. Yet a disquiet had settled over him. Maybe it was the guilt gnawing at him for deceiving Veronica, or perhaps the stark realization that sneaking around with Mia would only complicate his life further. Striding into the penthouse, he noticed the unusual quiet. Typically, Veronica would be up by now, sipping herbal tea and reading the morning headlines. He placed his keys on the kitchen counter, scanning the rooms. No sign of her. He ventured into the bedroom. Empty, the bed looked undisturbed. A jolt of alarm shot through him as he noticed the open closet doors. Veronica's favorite dresses and shoes were missing. Panic spread from his chest to his fingertips. What had happened? He searched the penthouse, calling her name. Nothing. Then he found the framed photo on the marble side table turned face down. His heart hammered. It was a small but telling sign that Veronica had left deliberately, and she was hurt. He dialed her number, but each call went straight to voicemail. Fear seized him as he remembered the last time he had lied to her about a work trip. A cold sweat broke out on his brow, recollecting how Veronica had been suspicious. Had she discovered the truth? Had she seen him with Mia? With shaky hands, he pressed speed dial for another number. His personal assistant, Emily Hargreaves. Emily, he said tersely, where's Miss S. Barnes? Emily's voice trembled. Sir, I'm not sure. She cancelled her morning appointments. I assumed she wasn't feeling well. Alexander ended the call abruptly. Next, he tried calling Sofia Delgado, one of Veronica's closest friends, but the call rang out. Summoning the driver, Martin Rhodes, gave him the same result. Miss S. Barnes had left with a small suitcase, refusing any official car from the Barnes fleet. Alexander felt desperation tighten around his chest like a vise. That morning, every business concern took a back seat. Alexander began to realize the depth of his mistake. Yes, Mia Donovan was beautiful, and there had been an undeniable spark of fascination. They met at a networking event, just drinks at first, then dinners discussing potential interior design for his upcoming hotels. It had started innocently, but illusions quickly blurred into something more physical, a forbidden thrill that lured him each time. He had foolishly convinced himself he could keep it hidden from Veronica. Now the potential cost was staggering, losing his wife, risking the well-being of his unborn child. Alexander sank onto the living room sofa, pressing a hand to his temple. Memories of Veronica flooded his mind, the day they first met at a charity drive where she'd volunteered, the nights they spent sipping wine, dreaming about their future. How had he gotten so lost? Swallowing the lump in his throat, Alexander resolved to find Veronica. He needed to beg her forgiveness, to explain, though he wasn't entirely sure what he could say to justify his transgressions. Suddenly, he pictured their child, the one who wasn't even born yet, and a pang of regret shook him. He should have realized fatherhood was more than finances and stability. It was loyalty, devotion, protection, yet he'd failed on all counts. Driven by fear and guilt, Alexander headed to the elevator, determined to do whatever it took to bring Veronica back home. Veronica huddled on Sofia Delgado's couch, sipping ginger tea to calm the queasiness growing inside her. Sofia's living room was cozy, its walls adorned with photographs of her travels, everything from Machu Picchu to the streets of Florence. The warmth and clutter of real life offered a stark contrast to the cold luxury of the penthouse. Veronica left behind. She felt safe here, away from the accusing silence and hidden shadows. Sofia returned from the kitchen, her expression etched with concern. She placed a comforting hand on Veronica's shoulder. "Ronnie, you need to see a doctor, just to make sure all this stress isn't harming the baby," she murmured gently. Veronica nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Yes, I'll schedule an appointment. She pressed a hand to her temples, voice faltering. "I still can't believe this. He's been lying to me for months, hasn't he? And I was too blind to see it." Sofia bit her lip, pondering her next words carefully. "I can't speak for how long it's been going on, but this Mia Donovan, I've heard her name mentioned in circles before. She's known for these, let's say, liaisons with wealthy men. It's possible that Alexander fell into her trap, but that doesn't excuse his behavior," Veronica said softly, a flicker of anger rekindling in her eyes. "He betrayed me, betrayed us." They were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Sofia stood, peered through the peephole, and glanced back at Veronica, eyes wide. "It's Alexander," she whispered. Veronica's heart pounded. She wasn't ready to face him yet. Her instinct was to bolt to the bedroom, but her trembling legs wouldn't comply. Sofia opened the door a crack. "Mr. Barnes?" she said, her tone guarded. Alexander's voice, though muffled, reached Veronica's ears. "Sofia, I just want to speak to my wife, please. I know she's here. I need to see her." Sofia turned to Veronica, who mustered what little composure she had. Slowly, she nodded. Sofia let Alexander in, but not without pinning him with a withering glare. Alexander stepped inside the modest apartment, his expensive suit and polished shoes looking out of place. His normally confident posture was replaced by guilt and uncertainty. He spotted Veronica curled up on the couch, her eyes swollen from crying. The sight shattered him. He moved closer, hands trembling at his sides. "Veronica," he started, voice tight with emotion. She raised her gaze to meet his, her expression a mix of betrayal and sorrow. "How could you do this?" Alexander exhaled shakily. I don't have an excuse. It was a mistake, a terrible one. I swear, it didn't mean anything. I was an idiot. Please, let me fix this." Veronica scoffed softly, tears brimming again. "It didn't mean anything. You lied to me. You're still lying." Sofia hovered in the background, ready to intervene if necessary. Alexander glanced at her, then back at Veronica. "I never wanted this. I love you, Veronica. I love our baby. And yet you were with her last night," Veronica replied, voice trembling. "A few hours after telling me you had an urgent flight to New York." He sank to his knees beside her, gently placing a hand over hers. His eyes were glassy with regret. "I'll end it. I promise you. It's over. I just need a chance to prove it." Veronica's breath caught. Part of her yearned to believe him. After all, she had built her life with this man. But another part screamed at her, not to be a fool again. She remained silent, tears spilling freely now. Sophia cleared her throat, looking between them. Alexander, I think it's best if you give Veronica some space. She's upset, and the stress isn't good for her or the baby. He nodded, hesitating before rising to his feet. I understand. I'm sorry, he whispered to Veronica. But I'm not giving up. I'll prove to you that our marriage is worth saving. Veronica watched him go, her head spinning. The moment the door clicked shut, the sob she'd been holding back tore out of her, and for a second she allowed herself to wonder if there truly was a chance to salvage what was left of their broken vows. Over the next few days, Veronica sought refuge in quiet reflection. She didn't respond to Alexander's calls or texts, despite them coming in steady waves. Instead, she scheduled a check-up with her obstetrician, Dr. Rebecca Lynn, at Lakeshore Medical. She arrived at the clinic early, wanting to avoid the paparazzi, who sometimes lingered around her usual haunts in hopes of capturing some exclusive drama related to the Barnes name. During the ultrasound, as she listened to the steady whoosh of her baby's heartbeat, tears welled up in her eyes. This tiny life deserved stability, deserved a father who would stand firm and unwavering. Could Alexander still be that father? When Dr. Lynn announced everything looked healthy, relief washed over her, but the emotional turmoil persisted. She spent the remainder of the day strolling through the city with Sophia, who listened intently as Veronica poured her heart out, her hopes, her doubts, her anger. Remember the time we were in college, and you swore you'd never let a man define your worth? Sophia prompted gently. You're stronger than you think, Veronica. Veronica nodded, rubbing her baby bump absently. But he's the father of my child, Soph. It's not so simple to just walk away. That evening, while Veronica was curled under a blanket in Sophia's living room, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sophia ushered in a middle-aged woman with kind grey eyes and elegantly tied-back hair. Veronica, Sophia said softly, this is Elizabeth Harrington. She's an attorney, a very discreet one. Elizabeth offered a polite smile. Miss S. Barnes, your friend Sophia asked me to come by. She believes you might be in need of some legal guidance. Caught off guard, Veronica stared at Sophia, who gave her a gentle nod. I just wanted you to have options, Sophia explained. In case you decide to separate or, well, whatever path you choose, you should be informed. Veronica's heart pounded. Divorce? She whispered, testing the word in her mouth. She had never thought she would utter it, not in her wildest nightmares. Elizabeth Harrington settled into a chair opposite Veronica. I'm aware this is a delicate situation, and I'm not here to push you in any direction. But if you wish to explore legal avenues like filing for separation, negotiating custody, or even prenuptial implications, I'm here to help. Emotions surged within Veronica, fear, betrayal, anger, and beneath it all, a flickering love she couldn't quite extinguish. Yes, she was hurt beyond measure, but the marriage had been real, at least to her. Did she truly want it to end in a courtroom battle? She thanked Elizabeth and promised she would think about it. After the attorney left, Veronica felt physically and emotionally drained. Unable to sleep, she wandered to the bookshelf, pulling out an old photo album she had tucked away at Sophia's place years ago. Inside were pictures of her younger self, grinning at college events, making silly faces with Sophia. And then she came across the earliest pictures she had with Alexander, back when they first started dating. One snapshot caught her eye. They were at a park, drenched in the golden light of sunset, Alexander holding her close as she laughed at something he whispered. She remembered feeling so loved, so cherished at that moment. She closed the album gently, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. Could they ever return to that time, or was it gone forever? Meanwhile, Alexander found himself drowning in a tempest of guilt and panic. He cancelled his meetings and delegated urgent tasks to his business partner, Harris Kim. His staff barely recognized him in this state, disheveled, pacing, short-tempered, yet strangely subdued all at once. He hardly slept, replaying the night at the Waldorf Hotel in his mind repeatedly. Each replay ended with the same dread: Veronica discovering him in that intimate moment with Mia. After unsuccessfully trying to contact Veronica for days, Alexander resolved to talk to Mia Donovan. Their affair, if one could even call it, that was the root of the disaster. On a chilly afternoon, he arranged to meet Mia at a quiet cafe away from prying eyes. The conversation was tense from the start. "Mia," he began, rubbing his temples, "whatever we had, it can't continue." She sat opposite him, her manicure tapping an idle rhythm on the wooden table. "You're ending it just like that?" she asked, arching a perfectly shaped eyebrow. Alexander sighed. "I should never have started it. Veronica's. She's everything. We're expecting a child, for God's sake. I was a fool." Mia pursed her lips, glancing around the nearly empty cafe. "We had fun," she said with a dismissive shrug. "But I won't beg you to stay. I can find another investor for my interior design expansions. Besides, we both know you wanted this too. You're not entirely blameless." Her words stung, reminding him that he had willingly embarked on this path of betrayal. "I'm fully aware," he replied, voice taut with regret, "and I'll be sure to fulfill any business commitments we made. But personally, this is over." A flash of annoyance crossed Mia's face, but she maintained her composure. "Suit yourself. As for your wife, I genuinely wish you luck winning her back. She's an impressive woman." She smirked, ironically. "You never know. Maybe she'll forgive you." Alexander flinched at the sarcasm. He settled the bill and rose to leave. The crisp wind outside the cafe felt like a slap across his face, harsh, bracing him for the battle ahead. He realized that words alone might never be enough to regain Veronica's trust. He needed to prove by actions that he could be the husband she once believed in. Over the next few days, Alexander tried everything to reach Veronica. He sent her heartfelt letters, flowers, and even voice messages acknowledging he had been a liar and a fool. Each day that passed with no response deepened his desperation. Her silence was its own verdict, telling him just how badly he had wounded her. Some nights he found himself curled up in the vacant nursery where soft yellow walls and plush toys awaited the baby. The emptiness gnawed at him. He recalled the time they'd spent picking out paint swatches and baby furniture. Veronica had glowed with excitement, imagining the life they'd share as a family. Now, he could almost taste the bitterness of losing it all. For the first time, Alexander understood that money was powerless in this realm. No amount of wealth, no extravagant gift could mend the fracture he had caused. All the while, he wondered if Veronica was contemplating the unthinkable divorce. That single word tormented him. The idea of losing his wife and child forced him to confront the man he had become. His lavish indulgences, his unstoppable ambition, were these what had driven him away from the very person he pledged to love forever? That night, he made a decision. He would take a step that might risk humiliating him publicly, but could also show Veronica how far he was willing to go to earn her forgiveness. Because he knew deep down this was not just about romance anymore. It was about family, about their unborn child, and he could not allow his mistake to define their future. Under normal circumstances, Alexander Barnes had a reputation for fiercely guarding his privacy. He despised tabloids, avoided interviews unless they benefited his business, and rarely indulged in public displays beyond what was strategically necessary. But these were no ordinary circumstances. On a brisk afternoon, Veronica was sitting in Sophia's cozy living room, half listening to the steady hum of the television. She was flipping through channels absent-mindedly, trying to distract herself from the conflict swirling in her mind, when her finger froze on the remote. The news anchor, Robert Kingsley, was talking about none other than Alexander Barnes. In a surprising turn of events, Robert Kingsley said Chicago's millionaire real estate mogul Alexander Barnes has made a public announcement regarding his personal life, referencing his estranged wife, Veronica Barnes, who is currently expecting their first child. Veronica's heart jolted. She set the remote aside as her eyes zeroed in on the screen. There was Alexander, standing at a podium in front of a cluster of microphones, the city's seal behind him. He looked tense, his usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled. Reporters clamored around, flashes from cameras illuminating the scene. "I have made grave mistakes." Alexander's voice echoed through the speakers, subdued. "I want to address these mistakes and ask my wife's forgiveness. Veronica, if you're watching this, I love you. I take full responsibility for my actions and the pain I've caused. I know words aren't enough, but please know I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make this right for you and for our child." A collective murmur rose among the press. They fired questions, but Alexander shook his head, declining to elaborate. He concluded his short statement with, "Veronica, I'm begging you for another chance. You mean everything to me." The camera panned back to the news anchor, who explained that this impromptu press conference had sent ripples through Chicago's high society. Rumors had been swirling about Alexander's infidelity, but now it was confirmed. The anchor speculated about the future of the Barnes family and their empire. Veronica's throat tightened. She turned off the TV, tears gathering in her eyes. She had never seen Alexander so vulnerable in front of the public. His sincerity tugged at her heart, and a complex swirl of emotions weighed on her chest: anger, hurt, love, and an unwilling longing to believe in him again. Sophia, who had walked in midway, rested a gentle hand on Veronica's shoulder. "He's truly sorry," she said softly. "I know it doesn't erase what he did, but this is a big deal for Alexander." Veronica nodded, swallowing her tears. She was still furious about his betrayal, but there was no denying the love she once felt for him. And the baby, her baby, deserved a chance to grow up with two parents, if that was truly possible. Later that evening, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Alexander. "I'm not sure you saw the press conference, but I meant every word. I miss you more than anything. Please meet me for dinner tomorrow. If you don't want to talk after that, I'll respect your wishes. Just give me one chance to see you." Veronica stared at the message for a long moment. She typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, she responded with a single word: "Fine." She wasn't certain what tomorrow would bring, but she needed clarity. Maybe seeing him in person, outside of the emotional chaos, would give her some semblance of direction. Whether it would lead to reconciliation or final closure, she couldn't say. But one thing was certain: she couldn't live in limbo forever. The next evening, Veronica slipped into a simple black maternity dress, her hair pulled back in a loose chignon. Sophia offered to accompany her, but Veronica insisted on going alone. She took a cab to a quaint Italian restaurant by the waterfront, a place she and Alexander had frequented in their early dating days. The soft glow of candlelight and the gentle clink of silverware set a melancholic stage for what could be the final act in their fraught marriage. Alexander was already seated at a corner table, dressed in a crisp white shirt with no tie, sleeves rolled up. He looked up anxiously as she approached, standing out of respect. His eyes, tired yet hopeful, fixated on her. She slid into the seat opposite him, her posture rigid. The waiter arrived with menus, but Alexander quickly signaled that they needed a moment alone. When the waiter retreated, the silence between them stretched taut. Veronica finally broke it. "Why this restaurant?" she asked, her voice calm. "Is this supposed to remind me of when things were better?" Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes, partly, but also because I wanted someplace familiar, where we shared genuine memories." Where it all began, Veronica studied him. Your public apology. That was unexpected. You hate media attention. He let out a shaky breath. I do. But I was desperate to show you I'm sincere. I know you may never trust me again, but I needed to make a statement I couldn't take back. The faint strains of a violin drifted from the restaurant's small stage. Veronica felt a pang of nostalgia. She remembered dancing in this very spot with Alexander 2 years earlier, newly engaged and full of dreams. Now the ghost of that memory made her chest tighten. "Tell me everything," she said, gaze unwavering. "I want the truth about you and Mia, from start to finish." Alexander rubbed his palms together, beads of sweat forming at his temple. "We met at a design expo in New York about 4 months ago. She pitched ideas for my new hotel chain. One thing led to another. Dinners turned into late nights. I was stressed, traveling often, and he faltered, his voice thick. We became close. It was an escape, Veronica, a distraction, but it was never love. I swear that. I got caught up in a moment of weakness. Then it spiraled. Her face was etched with betrayal. 4 months. While I was carrying your child." He dropped his gaze. "I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. I ended it." He sighed heavily. "Last week, right after you left. She means nothing to me." Veronica drew in a shaky breath, tears prickling her eyes. Anger churned within her. "You broke my trust. Do you even understand what you've done to us?" Alexander reached across the table, lightly touching her hand. She pulled away reflexively, but then let his fingers rest on hers. "I do," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it. I know I'm not worthy of your forgiveness, but I'll keep trying." She blinked back tears, her voice trembling. "What about our child? Do you realize the risk you took? Did you ever stop to think about how this stress could harm me or the baby?" He closed his eyes, tears threatening to escape. "Every night since you left, it haunts me. I want to be there for you and our child. I'm willing to do anything, even if it means stepping away from business, from expansions, anything to earn your trust back." Silence enveloped them once more. For a fleeting moment, the restaurant around them seemed to vanish, leaving them suspended in the sorrow and longing that had overtaken their relationship. Finally, Veronica nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm not promising forgiveness, but I can't ignore the fact that our child deserves both parents. I'm willing to try counseling couples therapy. If we still fail, at least I can say I tried everything before walking away." Relief flickered across Alexander's features. He nodded fervently. "Thank you," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You won't regret it." Veronica wasn't so sure. The heartbreak still weighed on her, and trust was a fragile thing once shattered. But she felt a small, hesitant spark hope, and for now, that was enough to hold on to, however tenuously. True to her word, Veronica scheduled a counseling session with a renowned therapist, Dr. Carla Whitmore, who specialized in marital issues and family therapy. Given their public status, discretion was crucial. Dr. Whitmore arranged for them to meet after hours at her private office in a quiet suburb to avoid unwelcome attention. Veronica arrived first, her nerves on edge. She had no idea how therapy would unfold, but she needed a structured environment to confront the emotional wreckage. She nervously glanced around the softly lit waiting room, taking in the comfortable chairs and muted earth. Tones meant to evoke calm. Alexander walked in moments later, tension radiating off him. They exchanged curt nods, nothing more, their hearts pounded with the gravity of what lay ahead. When Dr. Whitmore finally opened her door and ushered them inside, they settled on a plush sofa, maintaining a cautious distance between them. "I'm Dr. Carla Whitmore," the therapist began gently, seating herself across from them. She had a warm, reassuring smile and glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. I understand you both are going through a tumultuous time. I want you to know this is a safe space and everything discussed here is confidential. Veronica shifted uncomfortably. Alexander swallowed hard. They were so accustomed to appearing polished for the public eye, it was jarring to let the cracks in their lives show. But soon, Dr. Whitmore's empathetic demeanor encouraged them to open up. Veronica went first, describing her devastation upon learning of the affair, her fear for her unborn child, and her uncertainty about whether she could ever trust Alexander again. She spoke with tears and trembling hands, but her words carried a fierce resolve. Alexander then recounted his own turmoil, his growing distance from Veronica during her pregnancy, how he felt overwhelmed by business pressures, and how a momentary lapse in judgment spiraled into an affair he deeply regretted. As he spoke, he became choked with emotion, and for perhaps the first time, Veronica witnessed a raw vulnerability in him that was neither scripted nor strategic. Dr. Whitmore listened carefully, occasionally guiding them with open-ended questions. Veronica, when Alexander says he regrets his actions, what feelings does that stir in you? She asked softly. Veronica hesitated. I feel uncertain. Part of me wants to believe him, but another part can't forget the image of him with her. It replays in my mind constantly. I'm afraid to let my guard down and be hurt again. Alexander's voice cracked as he responded. I understand that, and I'm willing to accept the consequences of my actions. I'll do whatever it takes, as long as it takes, to show you I've changed. Over the course of the hour, they delved deeper into their communication issues. Dr. Whitmore gently pointed out that they had ceased communicating on an emotional level long before the affair began. Veronica admitted feeling overlooked during her pregnancy, while Alexander confessed he felt inadequate. Pressured to maintain a perfect life he was unsure how to handle. By the end of the session, it was clear that the rift between them wouldn't be fixed overnight. Yet there was a seed of hope that, with consistent effort, they might navigate a path forward. Dr. Whitmore scheduled weekly sessions. She left them with homework to set aside daily time to truly talk, without interruptions or pretenses. As they walked out into the cool night air, Alexander tentatively reached for Veronica's hand. For a moment, she allowed their fingers to interlace, seeking solace in the small gesture. She wasn't ready to claim they were healed, far from it, but for the first time since discovering the affair, she felt the faint glimmer of a future that wasn't consumed by betrayal. And in that moment, it was enough to take a small, uncertain step forward together. Weeks turned into months, and the winter chill gave way to the early signs of spring. True to their promise, Veronica and Alexander attended weekly counseling sessions with Dr. Whitmore. Slowly, they peeled back layers of resentments, fears, and misunderstandings. Each session was emotionally exhausting, yet with every tear shed, they discovered new insights into themselves and each other. Veronica began seeing small changes in Alexander's behavior. He scaled back on the incessant business trips, allowing Harris Kim to handle more tasks. He spent more evenings at home, cooking simple meals, even if his culinary skills left much to be desired, and focused on Veronica's comfort. They began sharing quiet moments in the nursery, Alexander placing a gentle hand on her belly as he whispered to the baby. It was tentative, but it was real. Meanwhile, Veronica wrestled with her own conflicts. Forgiving Alexander did not mean forgetting what he had done. It meant releasing the stranglehold of anger before it drowned her in bitterness. She kept a journal, recording her fears and hopes for the future. Some days, her heart ached with the painful memory of that hotel corridor. Other days, she allowed herself to relish Alexander's efforts without second-guessing them. Dr. Whitmore stressed that trust was rebuilt through consistent acts, and though progress felt slow, it was gradually forming a fragile foundation. By the time Veronica entered her third trimester, baby preparations took center stage. She and Alexander finally finished assembling the crib. They hung delicate, star-shaped lights around the room. At one point, while placing a stuffed giraffe on a shelf, Veronica glanced over to see Alexander awkwardly fiddling with the mobile. She couldn't help but smile. The sight of him so earnestly trying to create a safe haven for their child stirred up both tenderness and sorrow for how close they'd come to losing all this. Then came the day Veronica went into labor. It happened unexpectedly one morning, a few weeks earlier than planned. She clutched her stomach in alarm as pains rippled through her. Alexander, with a burst of protective urgency, swept her into the car. At Lakeshore Medical, Dr. Lin quickly assessed that the baby was ready to arrive, a little ahead of schedule, but looking healthy. Alexander held Veronica's hand through every contraction, whispering apologies and words of encouragement. In the throes of pain, Veronica saw flashes of their journey, the wedding vows, the heartbreak, the therapy sessions. When their baby finally emerged with a sharp, life-affirming cry, tears of relief and joy coursed down both of their faces. "It was a girl, Doctor," Lynn announced, placing the tiny, wriggling infant on Veronica's chest. In that moment, the enormity of what they had nearly lost struck Veronica hard. She clung to Alexander's hand as he looked at their daughter with awe. The weight of their past mistakes didn't vanish in an instant, but it receded, overshadowed by the profound love that bloomed in the presence of this new life. Later, as the nurse tended to Veronica, Alexander gently held their baby, gingerly supporting her fragile head. She opened her eyes momentarily, peering into her father's face. Overcome with emotion, he kissed her forehead, murmuring, "I will never let you down." Veronica, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, felt a swell of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, they were on the road to healing. The therapy, the apologies, the relentless effort, it all pointed to a future that might be free of deceit. And for that moment, in that hospital room, the ghosts of betrayal slipped away into the background. They were a family now, and with a trembling, uncertain kind of grace, they embarked on a new dawn. Their journey had been marked by heartbreak, deception, and countless tears. Yet, through unwavering determination, raw honesty, and the powerful bond of a newborn baby, Alexander and Veronica Barnes discovered a fragile, new beginning. While their future remained uncertain, they chose to face it together one day at a time. Thank you for watching and reading their dramatic story of love, betrayal, and hope.
He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife." I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money. Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. Not until we finalize our restructure, he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. I'll handle everything in the meantime. That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly. The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records, Elizabeth had an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her key card didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs, Marcus warned. But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal. It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, the day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust. A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. Jordan, is this true? Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds. She's not. Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter. Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain. Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Ms. Monroe, please step into my office. Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features, but he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership. Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud. Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. You can't shut me down like this, he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation. Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan. Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. You'll regret this, he warned Hartridge, then turned to Elizabeth. And you made a fool of me in front of everyone. Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. You did that to yourself, she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, they offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill two birds with one stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce. Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old emails messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, "and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz," he began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave, a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. Gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her, calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing, but this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime, and if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers. Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. Have we sent this to the SEC? Not yet, the advisor responded. We wanted to confront them first. Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars, Hartridge asked. And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation. Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby, he announced quietly. Thank you, Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. I believe we might need you. Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust. Hartridge's face remained stony. I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability. Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on. Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability. Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. Stand down, sir, the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. Let him go. This is a private matter. Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises. Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't do that. I'm on the board. Not anymore, Hartridge said grimly. I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you. A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her. You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won. But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. I'm sorry you had to endure this, Miss Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure. Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country, perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy, and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. "They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature," Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations, and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future.